Hey everyone, it's Peter Crewe-Brown here, and I'd like to welcome you to my first ever podcast episode. My podcast is called Mind Over Matters, and it's about pair planning. So the topic for today is the journey to episode 1. So what's happened before, I guess, today. And my guest today is going to be Darren from Suspended Animation. So what I'd do now is just like to introduce Darren. He's a photographer who started heavily using social media and podcasting to build his business, and was so amazed with the results that he never looked back once he started. So he's now very active in the social media marketing space, and he's a prolific podcaster who consults with organizations to help them get serious business results, integrating social media and podcasting into their marketing strategies. So in terms of what we're going to be covering today, I'm going to be talking about, as I said, this journey that I've undertaken. It's essentially an 8-year journey from the first discovery of podcasting, and I guess moving through a period when I was exposed to a fellow called John Lee Dumas, who was the first ever person to introduce a daily podcast. And he's became very successful on the back of that, and he offered a free training series, and I was part of that for a long time. And I actually eventually signed up as a paying client on his online training platform, but I dropped away over a period. I think the technology, or the joinery as I like to call it, got me. And I never did much with podcasting for the next 5 years. And about a little over a year ago, I met Darren, and he, if you like, reignited that interest that I'd had all those years ago in podcasting. And I was lucky enough to be a guest on Darren's show on 2 different occasions. I think episode 39, Darren, by recollection. And that was more talking about my journey, my work as a kind of a strategist. And then more recently, I signed up with an organization called Book Yourself Solid. And that was episode 130. So what's that, 90 odd episodes apart. I guess being involved in those 2 podcasts quite a distance apart, and seeing, master at work in Darren. I don't mean to embarrass you, but having done 135 episodes now, Darren's clearly a man who's mastered it. And when you see someone, I guess, reasonably effortlessly doing podcasting, it inspired me, and that's why I am where I am today.
Wow. Well, I appreciate the great feedback. I'm humbled.
Well, thank you, Darren. And, as I've said to you many times on the quiet, I wouldn't be here without your support. So, I've got much to thank you for.
My pleasure. And I'm so impressed that you've had such a burning desire. You've held on to this burning desire for 8 years, and you're finally recording your first episode. I'm very impressed, Peter.
Thank you. And it's what I've been doing a bit lately. Just out of curiosity, I'm part of an active group of people who work together on LinkedIn in terms of, just helping with content and giving feedback. And one of the things I did for the first time in mid-December, not dissimilar to this, is I finally took the leap, and I posted my first ever video post. And it was kind of interesting because I think, you tend to get filled with all these irrational fears. Yeah. And it actually turned out to be quite easy. I was walking along the beach one day, beautiful sunrise, and I thought, well, I know what I want to talk about. It's an interesting setup where I am. I literally got my camera out, shot the footage with the waves crashing in the background, and I thought to myself, I don't know why I waited this long. Absolutely. And I'm thinking it's the same with the podcast.
Definitely. I mean, especially now, because podcasting has become so much easier from a technology point of view, because we have Zoom, we have all these digital applications, we have podcast apps, we have digital mics, we have lights that are really easy to use. In the old days, you had to have a studio, you had to have people to do the editing and the post-production and, the engineering and whatever else. Nowadays, You can literally just execute a podcast and deliver a podcast in no time. So I think that's why it's become so popular again. It's almost made a resurgence.
And Darren, I mean, to that point, because as I said, I had this sort of 5-year hiatus from when I was looking at, what John Lee Dumas was promoting, and it seemed really complex compared to the way I see you do it. So I guess that's maybe something that could inspire any other listeners on the show who might be thinking of it. It seems to me, it's my first episode, so I can't talk with too much conviction, but it seems to me that the technology has become a lot easier, should I say. And that's, I guess, hope for everyone. Darren, what I'd like to do now, if it's okay, is just ask you to share with the audience what it is that makes you tick, and then after that, who in the business community you serve.
Sure, absolutely. So I appreciate the opportunity, obviously. Thank you again. So basically, a bit about my story, my backstory. I was working as a photographer. I still work as a photographer for many years. And at some point, I realized that things had to change in how I marketed my business and how I, promoted what I do, because cold calling wasn't working anymore. You didn't get as many referrals as you used to. Letter drops, website, SEO wasn't working as well as it did. So I thought there's got to be what's the new way to market? And a friend of mine actually and I started having a chat about digital marketing.
Just in context, Darren, how long ago are we talking, months or years?
We're talking probably 2-3 years ago.
Okay, so we're going back a bit.
Yeah, 2-3 years ago. And then I started doing a lot of research into this new world of social media marketing and digital marketing. I never realized what it was about. I didn't think that you could do much on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram to promote your business. I thought it was just, like friends on Facebook having a bit of fun.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, that's their sort of, or was up until quite recently, their perception of social media. It's, sharing with your mates what you had for breakfast, that sort of important stuff.
Literally.
Yeah.
And over the last couple of years, I've definitely seen it totally re-metamorphosize into a marketing platform.
Yeah.
And I kind of caught that journey, not really early, but a little earlier than some others. We're talking a couple of years ago. And I started heavily diving into using social media and podcasting to start marketing my business as a photographer. Yeah. And why podcasting? Because, I heard that podcasting was such a great way to reach your audience, to deliver fresh content to your audience, to establish yourself as a thought leader. So I thought, and I'm the type of person that if I get something in my head, I say, all right, I'm going to do it. Let's go. And I run with it and I see what happens.
And Darren, I guess what I like to pick up on there is, I think in some ways you're different. I find a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this like the best of them, I find reasons to procrastinate. And I think the biggest one for me is this idea of perfection. And I love the concept of the 80% approach. It's like, when you're 80% ready, you're good to go, because you're never going to be 100% ready. So get as ready as you can and then do it.
100%. And whatever technology you have, whatever tools you have, is what you're going to use. Sure. There's no excuses. I don't have the right mic. I don't have the right camera. Whatever you have, as you mentioned before, you had your phone, you went for a walk, you decided what a beautiful studio you're in. Let's just film a video right now. There you go. So it's the same thing with podcasting, or same thing with any content creation.
Yeah. And I use the term a bit. I used it with the LinkedIn thing, and I've used it, I think, in promoting my sort of entree into podcasting via a couple of posts I put out on LinkedIn. It's this idea of putting on your big boy pants. It's like, just suck it up and do it anyway.
Yep. 100%.
What's I say? Embrace the fear and do it anyway.
Embrace the fear, do it anyway. Go on the journey, and learn as you go. Yeah. People, you don't have to know everything before you start. It's a journey, as you say. You can learn forever, and you just keep getting better.
And I think it's the sports analogy. You hear a lot about sportsmen, I guess in these COVID times, where they practice and train, but they always say, until you're in the live environment, you're on the field and you're confronting the reality, that's when you learn the most. And it's with podcasting, you can practice all you like, but until you put yourself out there and, possibly have an imperfect first few attempts, you've got to be prepared to, have an imperfect product, but improve on it as you go.
Exactly. And that's kind of
Yeah.
the fun. I mean, it's no fun.
Yeah, it is.
If you're perfect out of the gate, there's no journey involved. There's
Exactly.
nothing to look back on in a way. So, I really believe that. And I think that everybody should just get out there in whatever journey they're looking to embark on from a social media or digital marketing content creation point of view. Just start where you start and have some fun, and you'll be amazed at where you end up.
So Darren, on that one, it's getting a little off podcasting, but I guess it probably applies equally to podcasting. This whole idea of where you should start with your social media. I mean, what sort of structure do you use to make sure that you're not being tugged around in too many directions? Do you have like a very specific plan of this is where podcasting fits in,
Yep.
this is where my work on LinkedIn fits in, and this is how much time I'm going to do each week on each activity, just so that you're not being dragged all over the place by the thing we talk about a lot, the shiny object syndrome?
100%. I agree with you. And I'm quite methodical in how I work, and I get up every morning quite early, not so much on the holidays, but I'm getting back into my swing now. And I dedicate my first half an hour or an hour to all my social media.
Yeah.
And that's when I'm the most creative. That's when I'm fresh. Everybody's different, but that's what
Yeah.
works for me. And then I say, all right, I'm going to be on my chosen platforms. And again, it depends on how much time you have. If you have a lot of time, you can be on more platforms. If you only have a little bit of time, concentrate on the one or two where you think you're going to get the best results. And when you have more time or have some help, you can start expanding to other platforms. But so whatever it is that's where your chosen audience lives, I start thinking about how I can deliver content to that audience every single day, if possible. And the key is to keep that fresh and with a lot of variety, and with potentially guests from my podcast. And that's the key, is really consistency, variety, and creativity as well. You've got to keep it creative, you've got to keep it fun and interesting and quality.
Yes.
But you've got to be consistent, and you've got to just dedicate that time to do that. And I'm glad you mentioned that before, is that for me, a podcast really just fits in to my wider social media content digital strategy.
Yeah.
A podcast is great as a podcast, and if you're Tim Ferriss or John Lee Dumas or Joe Rogan, you can do very, very well and make a lot of money just with the podcast. But for most of us, mere mortals out there, a podcast is just another exceptional way to deliver fresh content to your audience with fresh guests, with fresh perspectives. And as I mentioned to you earlier when we speak, my podcast content does better on social media than any of my other content, and I put out a lot.
That's simply extraordinary. So, Darren, I mean, for me, that really resonates, that it does better, because I know that you're quite prolific on a number of platforms. How do you measure? What sort of metrics do you use to be able to demonstrate how successful it's been compared to the others?
Yeah, a really good question. As you mentioned before, a lot of people can fall into the trap of being romanced by the metrics and what they call shiny object syndrome and whatever else.
And you know what? There's that saying, you might have heard. It's like, metrics are for vanity.
Yes.
And
vanity metrics.
Yeah, and attraction is for sanity.
Yep, I like that.
Yeah, having your raving fans. I think that's what Seth Godin talks about.
Definitely.
Having your tribe of raving fans.
Definitely, and actually, Seth's words come into my head all the time when I'm working on social media and looking at what's going on, because I'm seeing a lot more activity on social media right now every day. Like last year was insane.
Yes.
The acceleration of social media activity was incredible. This year it's as fast, even stronger, and it's only January, because people have realized finally what a powerful platform social media is for marketing, and everybody's going to do it, which means that we're going to be all competing for that potential audience. And then I'm always thinking to myself, Seth Godin says, find your tribe, create your tribe, just take it slow, consistently, and build your audience over time. So that's what's always in the back of my mind when I'm doing my work and I'm putting out my content and I'm creating and I'm doing podcasting is that I'm not too worried if not everybody sees it, but as long as my metrics are growing slow and steady. And when I look at my metrics, I look at just the basic stuff like.
So we're talking organic here, aren't we?
Organic,
It's
a lot of
it's
organic.
a slow burn. The good news about organic is that it's typically a lower spend thing, and the relationships you forge are deeper.
Definitely. Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely. Every now and again, I'll boost a post or I'll do put a little ad on,
Yeah.
but it's very low cost compared to, what I do, what I could do. And most of my work is organic.
Yes.
And over time, I'm looking at my views, how many people are engaging with that post, that podcast post, how many people are listening to it, how many people are sharing it. And if I see it's growing every month consistently, I know I'm on the right track. That's all I need to know.
Yeah, and
say,
there's that concept of split testing. You try something, it might not work, try something else, measure your results, and you go with the thing that gives you the best return.
Absolutely. Whatever's working, go all in.
Yeah. Darren, before you continue, just for any listeners out there who might be interested in, our reference to Seth, I would say Seth Godin, that's Godin, is probably the most prolific and most respected blogger in the business world. He puts out an incredible free daily email, which is a font of all wisdom for me. I pick up at least one a week that I share with my audience. I repurpose it and obviously attribute it to Seth. He's a very clever man, but on the matter of tribes, he wrote this book called Tribes, and it's a fascinating book in its structure besides anything else. It's the only book I've ever read that doesn't have chapters. It's just a continuous, dialogue. And I think it's less than 100 pages. So it's an easy read. It's a loose structure, and there's a lot of wisdom in there. And for anyone looking to find this elusive tribe, rather than, trying to gather 1,000, 10,000, whatever, followers who might deliver very little outcomes, the concept of finding a tribe of raving fans is really, I think, the way that we should all be thinking about how we engage on social media.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. I haven't heard anybody articulate it better than Seth Godin.
Yeah, a very smart guy. Very smart
brilliant.
Guy.
And I love the way he thinks about marketing and marketing to your smaller niches and your smaller audiences as opposed to trying to serve the world. He says you can't serve everybody. You have to carve out your tribe.
And, to your point there, Darren, one of the things that, we all now have an opportunity for is not trying to serve the world, but you've got access to the world. And that's the thing. Your tribe could be based, one person in every country in the world. Whereas before the internet, we didn't have that opportunity. So, if we can be very defined in our offering and come up with something really niche, we've got the whole population. Everyone who's on social has is an opportunity for a new member of your tribe. So it's a good time to be in business.
Definitely. And it's almost, as you're speaking, I'm thinking it's almost a double-edged sword because everybody's jumping on social media now as a really strong marketing tool, marketing platform, and putting together social media campaigns. So the competition is rife and the audience is more limited to catch. But when you do catch it, as you mentioned, it's global and you can find your tribe and build your tribe in a lot of areas where you never normally dreamed of working. So it's a bit of a paradox, but it's fantastic.
Yeah, and it allows you to tap into different communities. As I mentioned, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and I've just happened to stumble across a group of people based, of all places, in the sort of Liverpool, Manchester area. And it's so refreshing because they don't think exactly the same as we do in Australia. They're on different time zones and different climates. So you have this really interesting sort of interaction with these people because your worlds are so different. And that diversity, we all hear about it in the marketplaces. Don't employ everyone in your executive team to be, middle-aged men's club. And they get some gender diversity, get some racial diversity. And this is the same thing, having a tribe of people from different backgrounds, because a lot of these tribes, it's not just about the leader, it's about the peer-to-peer benefits you get from being in that tribe. And the more diverse, the more interesting, and the more likely to sustain for that group.
Absolutely. And I love, what you mentioned before is that you're starting to find these other tribes in other places. And I found that with my podcasting is that, by chance I might be referred somebody or someone stumbles across my profile on LinkedIn and I start doing some podcasting in another country. And then all of a sudden I start building an audience in that place and I get referred more guests and your podcast can become global. So it's fascinating what's happened and what's transgressed just from starting out really simply, for a small number of people with a passionate product, and it's just amazing what can happen.
And I think, in many ways, that's not something people think about when they get into a new venture like podcasting, the opportunities that come, because your journey is never going to be what you expected.
Yep.
And the unexpected sort of sliding doors type moments where you're going down a track and you think this is what I was, expecting, and you come to, a fork in the road and you take a choice that takes you down, an avenue you never expected, and that's often where the best opportunities lie.
Definitely, and it's so much fun because it's unexpected. It's so cool.
Yeah, so you're stepping out of what you know best, and you're meeting 100%. New people and coming across new opportunities.
Yeah, and it's
sorry, Darren.
No problem. And it's a great opportunity for growth as well because you're constantly pushing the barriers and
exactly
stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Darren, just also picking up on something you said earlier about you being a morning person and how you do your best thinking in the morning. There's a fellow called Cal Newport, C-A-L, and he's got a book called Deep Thinking.
Wow.
And it's all about this thing. I think the essence of it is that he believes you've got 2 really good hours a day for this deep work where you can really focus and get the best thinking, and then after that we tend to tire. And I know there's a fellow called William Blake, going back I think hundreds of years, who had this it's like a little rhyming thing saying something like morning is for thinking, noon is for work, evening is for eating, and night is for sleeping. So,
I love it.
And the reason I bring that up is that if I'm advising people about how to be more productive, I say, when is your most productive time? And allocate 2 or 3 hours in that window of your most productive time. Like for both you and I, it's clearly, probably before 11 o'clock. And do that thought leadership stuff, the things where you're really trying to create some new content. And then the other task that you do in a typical day, and that's client work or meetings with your staff, or any other admin tasks which you have to do those when you don't have to be thinking deeply. Having a client meeting, I'm not saying you don't need to think, but having a social engagement or an interaction with a client doesn't require the same bandwidth of deep thought that creating content does. So being deliberate of how you spend your time, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. Like getting up at 5:30, 6 a.m. I have my coffee, and it's like my mind is clear. It's a blank canvas.
Yeah.
And all my best ideas come to me because I'm fresh. As you say, later on in the day, you get bogged down with a million things. You get thrown into a million tangents. You're tired. You're exhausted, and you just want to. If you did have to do anything, you just want to do it quickly and move on. But you wouldn't do it the same way as if you did it when you were fresh.
And Darren, to your point there, it's like, if you believe you've got this small window of really deep thinking time, you don't want to spend it answering mindless emails.
Yeah, I agree.
Do that when you're kind of tiring in the afternoon, and often a lot of that stuff doesn't require a great deal of thought.
Yep, 100%. Totally agree.
So just back to the whole podcasting thing, Darren. Can you tell us 3 do's and 3 don'ts of, I guess, what you, in your experience, would nominate as a podcast host? What are the 3 most important things that you think you need to get right, and 3 things to avoid?
Sure, perfect. I've made a few notes here, so I made sure that I could give everybody my best stuff.
Cool.
In terms of the do's, first and foremost, I think about podcasting as if you're creating a stage or you're creating a platform for your guests to shine and for you to be able to deliver fresh, varied, quality content to your audience. So you're putting together this whole platform, this stage, this incredible content machine. And that's a really great way to think of your podcast, because a lot of people, they don't prepare, they don't structure, they don't create properly, they don't execute properly, and it's a lost opportunity. So really, if you think about this podcast with the incredible potential that it has, make sure you utilize it to the best of its potential. So,
and it's also disrespectful to your guests, isn't it? It's
100%.
You're asking them to give up an hour or whatever of their time, and if you're not giving them the best opportunity to showcase, what they do, that's disingenuous.
I 100% agree. It's actually, it's rude. I mean, you're inviting someone and then you give them 5 words and then you say, thank you very much, guys. Great show. I'll see you next way. And the person says, what was I here for?
And look, at the risk of giving you some gratuitous, support, I have found in the 2 episodes we did together that the whole process just flowed. And I think often when you have an experience like that, you think it's easy, but there's been a lot of work in the background. And that's the secret, isn't it? Whatever you do, it needs to be appear effortless, but it's not effortless because of lack of effort. It's effortless because of a lot of planning.
Exactly. It's effortless because you've made it so. You've built, you've prepared everything to the nth degree. You've done all the hard work up front to make the actual delivery of the product seamless.
Cool.
And that's 100%.
So Darren, are there any other do's specifically? So the first one is creating the stage, and it's all about the client. It's not about you, isn't it? Exactly. Oh, sorry, it's all about the guest.
The guest, exactly. It's about the guest and about your audience.
Yes.
You're creating a show, and you're creating a content or a station for your audience, for their benefit, not for your own.
So we don't need the podcast host peacocking, do we?
No, exactly right.
With a pretty face like yours, I understand why it's a temptation.
Number 2 would be promote. You have to learn how to promote your podcast, because just like a website, you can have the world's best website, but it could be the world's best kept secret because nobody knows it's there. So that's where marketing and promotion, particularly with social media, come in, is you have to learn how to promote that show, just like Hollywood would promote a show, or, TV stations would promote something, or promote an election or whatever. Promotion is really important to learn the art and skill of promotion to allow people to actually access that great podcast that you've actually put together for them. Yeah.
So creating content which never sees the light of day is a fairly futile exercise.
Yeah, 100%. So promotion is very important.
Yeah.
And the third one in terms of the do's is be patient.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff takes time. As you mentioned, it's a journey. There are so many podcasts out there these days. Mind you, not many of them get past episode 20 or 25, I heard. Some statistics.
Yeah, you did mention that to me off air. And I think, that's a good yardstick for any aspiring podcast host, just to know that you need to stick with it for a period and get the experience and the confidence that comes with running 20 shows. So it's not something you become an overnight success, but if you stick with it, there's a good opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, as they say, there's no such thing as an overnight success. All the greatest bands and artists and actors have been at it their whole lives, and finally they make that break, and people think that it's been an overnight success, but the pre-work to get to that point was God knows how many decades in the making.
Yeah.
So it's the same journey with podcasting.
Thanks for that, Darren. So, look, do you have, a couple, 3 things to avoid to, give your podcast the greatest opportunity for success?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they kind of tie in a little bit. First one, it's kind of goes together with that point we just made of being patient, is don't give up too early. Resist that temptation.
And think of it as like a 6-month project.
Definitely. And I think there was a fantastic book I read years ago by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich.
Yes, we all know Think and Grow Rich.
And I think one of his concept is 2 feet from gold or something like that.
Yeah. The thing about a miner.
Yep. And you could just be so close. and you give up too early. So
Yeah.
really important not to do that.
Yeah.
And
Very
also
sage
open
advice.
yourself to all these amazing opportunities that will come your way
Yes.
that were unexpected, as you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Second one is, again, don't let the ego take over. You know, as a
Okay.
podcaster, a lot of people can fall into the trap of, as we mentioned, what's the word? Hijacking the conversation, peacocking, talking, and it's really about your guest. It's about
You
making
want to
your guest,
showcase the guest rather than
showcase your
yourself.
guest, and
Yeah.
also make your guest feel special and
Sure.
have such a great experience that they will start referring you other guests, because
Yes.
that's going to feed your podcast.
Yeah.
That's your guest is the lifeblood of your podcast.
Yeah.
So it's really important that you look after them and treat them as such.
Yeah. Look, that's really great advice.
Yeah.
Anything else?
And the last one is, don't get caught up with the technology, as we
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. You know,
That's been my biggest, I guess, challenge.
it's really easy nowadays. You can get, people to help you. You can learn so much on the internet. You don't have to have a whole studio. It can be done really easily and simply. And people have put together some really incredible podcasts with loads of episodes with an absolute shoestring budget. You don't have to go crazy.
Yeah. And I guess, as you become more successful, if you want to slightly improve the video or the audio, you can start spending money on the top of the line. But I think often with those things, from what I hear, is that to get an extra 5% improvement in audio, you're having to spend a substantially bigger number.
Definitely.
So those incremental increases, cost a lot of money. So the basic thing, you're getting 80 to 90% of what you need.
Definitely. And a really good point to make there, as you mentioned, is it's about the content. It's not so much about the sound or the video. The sound is important for a podcast, even more important than a video, because if it really sounds terrible or distorted, people will switch off. But as long as it's 80%, that's fine. But it's 100%, what are you saying? What are you giving your audience? How can they learn? What information are you giving them? What are you feeding them? That's most important, not the rest.
And Darren, one of the things I guess I hear a lot, and I think it's becoming quite almost trendy, this whole idea of being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And, authentic isn't code for being shoddy. It just means people want to see the real person behind, the delivery. So, presenting the real you, but doing it in a professional way.
Definitely. Yeah. Being authentic, being as professional as you can.
Yeah.
But being yourself and letting your audience get to know you. Because that's one of the things, I suppose, that's different about a podcast and a radio show, or, a mainstream broadcast. They're more polished. They have the polished tech. They speak in a polished way. The beautiful thing about a podcast is our audience can get to know us as people.
Yeah, and that's crinkles and all, right?
Exactly, 100%.
I mean, you perfect, but we're not all that way.
Far from it. But absolutely, it's really important to, to just be human, and people really connect with that. And I think that's why
people relate to you, because it's interesting. Sorry to cut you off. Sure. We all hear about B2B, and a lady who works out of the States, her name's Anna Malikian. She's Portuguese by background, and she introduced this concept to me for the first time. It's all about P2P. It's person to person.
Yep, I like that.
People buy the other person. They don't necessarily buy the organization behind that person.
They buy. People do business with other people.
Yeah.
That they know, like, and trust. 100%.
Yeah. Darren, just moving along, thanks for those tips. I love the idea. We've got 3 specific do's and don'ts. Is there, some specific way that is best to kind of make contact with you? How's, how do you engage with prospects? What's the best way to reach out?
Sure, absolutely. Appreciate that. I mean, easiest way is to just jump on my website, and then you can link out to everything that you might need from there, which is just suspendedanimation.com.au.
.au, okay.
And then from there, you can find my podcasts on Apple, on Podbean, on YouTube. You can find my social media work. You can find my photography work. You can find everything.
And just to confirm, I mean, we're talking specifically about social media and podcasting today, but your sort of career or your business world started in photography. So that was how you first came into small business.
Exactly. So basically, my journey was I started utilizing podcasting and social media to market my own photography business, and then I fell in love with it to such a degree that I now teach and I coach other small businesses on how to actually get those results from their business using social media and podcasting.
Wonderful. Darren, just to wrap it up, a final question. Is there one thing that you could share with the audience that is a sort of a quick win, something that you find a lot of people maybe don't do and that they could do and have somewhat of a difference on the success of their business?
Oh, good one. There's so many things. But you know what? I would say, honestly, is whatever it is you're thinking about doing, dive in.
Yeah.
And dive in. And if you fall over, you get back up again, you learn, you grow, you start the journey of research and development through that process. But most people, and this applies to people on social media and people doing all sorts of things, that you always hear people say, this year I'm going to do this, or next month I'm going to do that, or I'm thinking about a strategy for how to do this, and then you come back 6 months later and nothing's
Still
changed.
Still thinking.
So
well,
there's a
wonderful acronym for what you're talking about. I don't know if you've heard of it. RFA.
No.
Ready, fire, aim.
Yes, exactly. I've heard that. I love it.
Yeah.
So true. I really believe in that.
Yeah. So get out there and do it. You're going to make mistakes, whether you start now or get it perfect, whatever perfect is. So, get out there and make your mistakes early.
Make the mistakes early, make them along the way, embrace the mistakes. They're part of who you are.
It's part of the learning experience.
Part of the learning experience, and it's part of your journey later on. You look back and you have some fun, you'll have a giggle.
And the thing I always say to people, you can't learn experience in a book. You learn experience by doing.
Definitely. Yeah. You can't learn anything in a textbook.
You can learn the theory of it, but you can't learn the practical application of the theory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You could read 100 podcast episode drafts, but then until you actually host your first episode like you're doing now, it's a very different story.
Well, all I can say is for anyone else who starts their podcasting journey, I hope that you have as an agreeable guest as you, Darren. You've been an absolute pleasure. I'd really like to thank you for being on the show. I know you're a busy person, and seeing you on the opposite side of the fence as the guest rather than the host is interesting for me to see the two sides of Darren. So guys, this is Peter Crewe-Brown signing off from episode 1 of Mind Over Matters. See you next time.